Support comes from Gemma, architects, planners, and designers seeking to bring joy to their clients and communities. Details at gemastl.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. Some St. Louis public transportation enthusiasts have for years pushed for an expansion of the light rail service known as MetroLink, particularly a line that goes to North and South St. Louis. And what was a pipe dream a long time ago seemed more realistic after 2017. That's when voters approved a sales tax increase that was marketed to residents as a means to pay for MetroLink expansion. And eventually, then St. Louis Mayor Tishaura Jones backed what was known as the St. Louis MetroLink Green Line, which if built would have seen a street-level light rail train connecting Jefferson Avenue, Chippewa Street, and Fairground Park. When she was on the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air last year, Jones said expanding MetroLink to North St. Louis was a priority.
Well, I want to keep my promise to the people in North St. Louis. We started collecting money in this tax and told them that we would build them a MetroLink, and to build them bus rapid transit would not be keeping our promise to them.
Flash forward to late last month, and the Green Line seems all but dead. St. Louis Mayor Kara Spencer pulled the plug on the project, saying in a statement that the Green Line likely wouldn't get federal funding critical to its construction. And instead, she'll be pursuing what Jones talked about in that clip, bus rapid transit. That's a term used to describe, among other things, dedicated lanes for buses. And while Spencer's announcement was a blow to MetroLink expansion proponents, it received a warm welcome from Carla Alexander. She's on the advisory board of the Jeff Vanderloo Neighborhood Association. And outside her home in the neighborhood yesterday, she said residents did not like the idea of a noisy light rail system in their neighborhood.
Major concerns with the light rail running street level in front of homes. That was our biggest thing. The safety factor and just, stepping out of your front door, can you imagine? We couldn't. And so that was just the biggest problem for us, because we felt that even with our historic districts, we have a historic district in the South, Lafayette Square, they have a historic district. JBL, we have two national, historic districts, and we felt that our older homes would be compromised. We were given no kind of, satisfaction as to if our foundations or structural damage were to happen. We didn't get any kind of confirmation or anything from BiState Metro to say, okay, we got you. If something happens, we're going to take care of it. So, no, that wasn't acceptable, running street level light rail.
Alexander said the Jeff Vanderloo already has some challenges like vacant lots and buildings, and that north-south line through the neighborhood wouldn't have benefited the community. But she said the possibility of the Green Line did bring her community together.
We faced for years eminent domain. We faced for years, people coming in and taking over, developers taking over our neighborhood, telling us what we want, what we need and all of that. So this lesson learned hopefully can continue to say, don't just say you listen to the community and you've had these meetings and everything. You need to do what the community is saying. If it's community-led, community-driven, then mean it.
That was Jeff Vanderloo Neighborhood Association Advisory Board member Carla Alexander, talking outside her home yesterday with St. Louis on the Air producer Maya Norfleet. So what's next for mass transit in the St. Louis region? Earlier this morning, I spoke with BiState Development President and CEO Taulby Roach. Roach's agency is in charge of managing Metro Transit's bus and light rail services. And he says the end of the Green Line could be a chance for less expensive alternatives. I first asked Roach what the public's reaction has been since Spencer announced the cancellation of the Green Line project.
I think it's been reasonable, right? Because no matter what, what we saw with the taxing initiative from 2016, 2017 is people want more transit in the city, right? But the question is, how do we build a system that's affordable? And I think one of the things that we certainly heard from really thousands of public outreach interviews is that folks want to see a project that's impactful, but will still be affordable from the city. So I think most of the reaction has been positive because we're trying to roll this out indeed with the public's input.
Before we talk more about the longer-term impact of this decision, can you just describe how the Green Line would have functionally worked? Would it have been like a train track built into the street? Would it have had elevated rail that you see in some parts of St. Louis County and the city? Like, what is the Green Line for people that may not know what it is?
Sure. So in the rail configuration that we figured that roughly would cost $1.1 billion, we were looking at a 5.6 mile alignment that ran in Jefferson Avenue, street running. So this would have been a low floor vehicle, very similar to what the Kansas City streetcar would be as an example, just across the state. And we would have run it with a 10 station configuration and would have run end to end like that. And we accomplished a 30% design configuration there, which allowed us to reprice it. And frustratingly, it's really coming out a really too expensive given where we are on a tax revenue standpoint.
I ask that question about what it would have functionally looked like because members of the Jeff Vanderloo Neighborhood Association told St. Louis on the Air producer Maya Norfleet that had it been built, the Green Line would have caused all sorts of problems for people that live on Jefferson Avenue, including it being very noisy and possibly, depending on how it's built, maybe it would vibrate the homes. How often did you get that type of feedback? And even if it wasn't the reason the line faltered, is it possible that this is a blessing in disguise for some of the people that live in the neighborhood that would have been affected by this Green Line?
Well, certainly, I have tremendous respect for those folks at Jeff Vanderloo. We talked with them several times. And look, these are folks who are engaged in their neighborhood and care what happens. They're the exact kind of people that we want to talk to. We may disagree on some individual pieces here and there, and that's okay. So I would disagree that a light rail alignment would be that impactful. In fact, historically, we've through really almost 100 years ago, there was a trolley line that ran right down Jefferson Avenue. It was known as the Red Line. So it's really a return to our historic roots. But nonetheless, the pivot, in fact, is being cognizant of what some of the neighbors have concerns about, right? And moving to a bus rapid transit line will be less impactful than a larger train, and we'll be able to run along the streetscape, albeit with some of the benefits of light rail.
We'll get back to the Green Line's future in a minute, but you said bus rapid transit. How does it differ from the bus service Metro currently provides?
Yeah, it's radically different, and we still will have bus service. There's no question. Look, fundamentally, even in our existing system right now, bus accounts for a good 65% of our overall ridership. You know, what it is an integrated system that feeds into each other. Yes, we have the spine with MetroLink, which obviously is the most expensive. However, it's the most efficient, right? It carries the most people in a short period of time. But to access all the corners of the region, then we use the bus system that feeds into MetroLink. But very typically, our bus system will have headways of, let's say, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. So it's not as frequent as a BRT fundamental line would be.
Let's just say the bus rapid transit ends up traveling along the same path as the Green Line MetroLink plan. What would actually have to be done to pave the way, pun intended by the way, for bus rapid transit to occur?
Yeah, so it's much cleaner as far as the Engineering is involved, and obviously then the construction, because we wouldn't have to do rails, we wouldn't have to do catenary. Catenary is literally how light rail vehicles are powered from above. So we wouldn't have to do a lot of that. It's not as heavy as light rail, so we would have to do less changes to the roadbed, etc. So it would be much easier for us to do this. And it really brings me to a really important part, is that we have the alignment defined. We can still benefit from some of the work that we've already done. For instance, very critical, the environmental assessment of this corridor has been done. That's part of the work. And we'll be able to move that forward, especially with the successful negotiation with FTA, who wants to see a project like this move forward.
And can you explain what that is?
Sure. So whenever we're moving through a project like this, we have two hurdles that we have to go through: public outreach, public input into what is the federal process, and an environmental assessment of what are the impacts of the alignment itself. Well, obviously, bus rapid transit, which would be on the existing roadbed, has less impacts, right? So it's a little easier from an environmental assessment standpoint. But all of these boxes must be checked in our application, ultimately to get federal funds from Washington, D.C., which absolutely has to happen, no matter what the project is: bus, rail, anything.
And that gets to my next question. How much would bus rapid transit cost compared to MetroLink expansion? How much of that would be federal money? How much of a local match do you think it would require?
Well, and BRT is a fraction of the cost, simply because it is much less impactful. The engineering is much less. We already discussed some of that. So let's say if we went on the existing alignment at roughly 5.6 miles, I would like to target the bus rapid transit project closer to $450 million for that corridor. Now, the mayor's asked us to look at a longer corridor, which we certainly have the opportunity to do. But obviously that changes the financial dynamic significantly, because the city is already putting aside the money with the 2017 tax and has roughly $90 million in the bank right now. The city holds it, I don't hold it, and that is the local match component. So if we were looking at an 80-20 split, which is very typical from a federal capital investment grant, which we would be submitting for, the fundamental financial feasibility looks stronger because there's a greater local match capacity within our application.
Has there been any indication that the Trump administration is interested in funding bus rapid transit or any mass transit programs at all?
Well, so obviously monitoring FTA and what is happening in DC is a big part of my job. I need to advance an application that I think will be competitive. So one of the things, there have been some good news pieces in the transportation and FTA in that agency has not been gutted like many others, right? And we do expect to see, and there is capacity within the legislation that was passed to continue some projects. Now, do I think that there might be some areas in the country that will not benefit from that? Yes, I think that's very possible. You've seen the administration target some projects that they did not like on the coasts, but that's not what this project is. One of the good strategies that we can represent when we go to Washington, D.C. is, look, we had a $1.1 billion project in rail. We saw it as being too expensive, so we looked at it and we talked to the public about it, and now we're pivoting to a much more affordable project. I think that will be well received in DC. And of course, I think one of the big things is that we can expect some support from our Senate leaders in Schmidt and Hawley, and obviously our congressional leaders as well.
We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with BiState Development's Taulby Roach. Welcome back to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. Let's return to my conversation with BiState Development's Taulby Roach. Before the break, Roach shared his reaction to the end of a proposed plan to expand MetroLink. Let's take a step back for a moment. Can you talk about how BiState Development oversees the mass transit system in St. Louis and which jurisdictions, and by jurisdictions I mean counties or the city of St. Louis, are at the table, so to speak?
Right. So BiState really runs several different business units, but our biggest business unit is, of course, Metro Transit. And Metro Transit is supported by three distinct political entities. That's St. Clair County in Illinois, the city of St. Louis, and St. Louis County. And roughly by percentage, St. Louis County is about 55 to 60%, and then the remaining 40% is split pretty evenly between the city and St. Clair County.
When you say the percentage, you mean the funding that those jurisdictions put in?
That's right. Funding and essentially service, which are parallel.
Now, we know that this north-south line for MetroLink is not on the table, but what about other MetroLink expansions? Are there any areas of Missouri or Illinois that could benefit from that expansion? Or is it going to run into the same problem that it's just going to be too expensive and not be able to get federal funding?
Well, one of the things that Illinois is doing right now, really St. Clair County Transit District in partnership, is they are expanding MetroLink out to Mid-America Airport right now. One of the reasons why that expansion is less expensive to build right now is that they are seeing the future really in advance, where right now, it might be a little early and they don't command the ridership for that extension right now, but because we are developing that extension right now, before there's a lot of parallel development, it's just cheaper to build, right? So we're building the infrastructure in advance, which then should be a catalyst for the development of that airport. So whenever there's better access at a transportation node like that, and a great one in Mid-America Airport, we think it's a good opportunity. And I really think that the political leaders, in particular Mark Kern, is kind of looking to the future. He may not see the benefit ultimately of that airport. That may be generations away, but they're seeing where they want the future of St. Clair County to go.
I know this may seem fantastical given the political leadership of both of these places, but just from a functional standpoint, let's just say voters in St. Charles or Madison County, Illinois, decided that they wanted bus service or they wanted MetroLink. What exactly would they have to do to join with the other three jurisdictions?
They got to pay for it. It's just that simple, right? I do not run service for free. And no matter what, I will often be asked, Taulby, can you add service here or there? Well, I need to go to the political leadership and be sure that they are willing to pay for that service. And that's why we regularly review, for instance, with the Board of Aldermen and a budgetary standpoint, or with the St. Clair County Transit District, or of course with the County Council. And we will give reports on how ridership is going, and we'll make those decisions together.
So you mentioned the County Council. Mm-hmm. I have had the pleasure of going to County Council meetings for well over a decade on and off. It has been one of the greatest experiences of my life. And one of the ongoing tensions that often revolves and one of the ongoing tensions I usually see between council members and MetroLink leadership is there's this feeling that St. Louis County is getting deprioritized for things like the Green Line project. Can you maybe talk about that? Because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of St. Louis County residents who are listening to this, and they may not use MetroLink as much as people in the city, but they probably want to know where their tax dollars are going toward.
Sure. So that's a normal look. I see you almost every Tuesday, especially during budget season, when I am there and talking to the County Council. Quite frankly, I think our relationship with the County Council is a very good one. They ask us hard questions, ask me hard questions, as they should, because they're representing the taxpayers and want to be sure they're getting their bang for their buck. But there's no question, Jason, that I am challenged with running a public asset that goes over political boundaries, and that's difficult, right? So one of the most common modes of travel right now, especially on MetroLink. And I take MetroLink in the morning very typically. I take a very early train. I take the Skinker train. So think of that. I take the Skinker train at like 6:30 in the morning. I'm going in. And when I look at the train going west, right, typically I have a lot of citizens who are going to the west at that time at 6:30. Where are they going at 6:30? Well, every single one of those people are going out to St. Louis County. If you imagine that I'm at Skinker. So that means that those are city people who live in the city but working in the county. That is how our region will work. And you're right, I need to translate that policy initiative, how important transit is to the county, to those county council people, and have them understand what does transit mean to the economic vibrancy all the way out to the county.
One of the other ongoing challenges you often hear at a county council meeting is safety on MetroLink. And MetroLink has changed several platforms and introduced turnstiles. What can you say about what effects that has on safety and how they've worked so far? Because it is a new thing that I think the public is probably getting used to.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the initiatives that we have just tattooed into how Metro Transit is going to work is that we will pivot off of safety and security. Period, hard stop. And one of those has been the very exciting program called the Secure Platform Project, which is a $52 million project involving gating the entire system, but also tremendously effective real-time camera center, which is in place right now and operating. This entire security system will be finished in January of 2026. Very excited for this rollout. But Jason, what's really exciting about a project like this, it doesn't just make MetroLink safer, it makes our whole region safer. And let me give you an example of that. We regularly partner with all 3 police jurisdictions, and we get video requests having to do with crime, even people who may be lost, that aren't even on our system. But because we have these video assets, we are able to, for instance, solve crime and make the communities around MetroLink safer. It's a tremendous asset. It's not that complicated either, right? It's fundamental, regular, good community policing. And we put that into a fundamental element of the design of MetroLink. Very proud of that. What we've done is we've listened to what the public wants, and I think we're going to pursue it.
So I've read some articles about how the new gates have at times had some kinks that had to be worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Why has that been a problem, and what's being done to make sure that those systems work more efficiently?
Well, no matter what, look, I have 39 MetroLinks to retrofit those stations, and we have thousands of people moving through those gates. So no matter what, there's always going to be some things that we should tune and work around to be sure that it can work as best as we can. One of the things, Jason, that I really need to do with running a public asset like this is I always need to be looking for consensus, right? So I need 90% agreement. I'm not going to get everybody who will agree with everything that we do, but I'm going to get the majority of people to agree with it. Will there occasionally, will I have a bus driver who has a bad day that I got to deal with? Sure, that happens. Will I have a gate that doesn't always work perfectly? Yeah, that'll happen, but 90% of the time they will, and most of the time I'm out in the public representing the great work that the men and women of Metro Transit do, including our security teams who are out there making their community safe. I'm really proud of the work they put in.
So my final question for you is going back to my flippant remark about 2085. Because I am interested to hear your perspective on what do you think the long-term planning for Metro Transit will be 20, 30, 40 years down the line? And how do you think transportation will be different compared to what we have today? Also making clear that we can't predict whether flying cars will finally be available in 2085.
Well, one of the biggest things is you just can't be static. You can't put your feet in concrete. And as an example, we had an open design concept with MetroLink, right? And what the public was telling us is that it wasn't working, right? So we had to change our thinking of that fundamental transportation asset and put security where the public wanted. And the reason why I want to use that example is that I was certainly an adherent to the open system at one time, and it took some time to change the thinking along with the public on it. And what I would ask everyone to see is that, look, see how the playing field changes, see how our community changes, and our transportation should change around that. It's literally the fabric of the communities that we have. Look, nobody used to talk, for instance, in the street department about sidewalks and bicycles and calming. That wasn't even a conversation 10 years ago. But I'm going to tell you it is now, right? When I walk into room 200, when I walk into Sam Page's office, as I did yesterday, when I talk to Mark Kern, they want to talk about what are those other transportation assets. And I like to think of myself as a transportation professional. Yes, I'm working in the transit sphere, but I want all of those other things to work together to move our community, to be sure that people are comfortable in their communities and that we are being an asset to a greater economic future of St. Louis.
Today's episode was produced by Jason Rosenbaum.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.